to develop a deeper understanding of Buddhism using observations from science. So before we get into the details, I want to share a little bit about me. So as Tina said, I started my journey in Tzu Chi in Northern California more than 20 years ago. So those few years in Northern California were very important years for my own development. So I left Northern California to go back to Taiwan in 2003. So after I went back to Taiwan, I started working for different companies, and I also started my own business. And in 2018, after like 13 years in business, my wife, who I met in Taiwan, and I came to the realization that when we started the business, we wanted it to be a vehicle for doing good. So to do things alongside Tzu Chi, be an ally of Tzu Chi. However, in 2018, we realized that what we were doing was not proactive enough. So at that time, we were still Tzu Chi volunteers, and we still go to Tzu Chi events. And in one of the conferences that Tzu Chi held, we heard Guo Qi Shishong say that we only had 12 years to do something about global warming before we reach thermal runaway, and there's nothing we could do about it. So these 12 years were going to be very important. So we thought to ourselves, hey, what are we going to do in these 12 years? If we're not proactive enough, we knew that we would not be able to live with ourselves afterwards. So right then, we made the decision to basically let go of our company. We gave our company to our employees, and we moved to Hwang to work on Tzu Chi's missions full time. So when my wife, she went into 宗教处 right away, I delayed my entrance into Tzu Chi by 2 years because I was transitioning the company over to our employees, and I was developing a software package that I hoped would be useful for Tzu Chi's missions, strategic coordination using system dynamics for anyone interested. And another thing that I really needed to do for myself was I needed to figure out whether Buddhism was true or not. So I had been a Tzu Chi volunteer for about 20 years at that time. However, I did not consider myself a Buddhist because while I really like Buddhist teachings on how we should treat others, how we should try to purify our own minds, I did not have confidence in Buddhist cosmology. In other words, I did not have confidence in the Buddhist description of how the world worked. Mount Sumeru, Rio, Xunishan. So I did not have confidence in Buddhism, but I knew that if I were to come into a Buddhist organization, in order for me to be effective, I needed to understand and agree with its worldview, its value system. It was only then that I realized that my assumption that Buddhism had no basis in reality was just an assumption. And I had actually never done any research into whether that assumption was true or not. Look into whether the claims of Buddhism were true or not. Now, that does not mean I have all the answers. I know a lot of people here have much deeper cultivation than I do. So I'll be just sharing what I know, and hopefully we can get into a discussion afterwards. So I also want to survey the audience for everyone's background so I have a sense of how fast we can go. If your educational background is more in the humanities, please raise your hand. How about in the sciences? Okay, great. This is definitely we're a scientifically oriented audience. That's wonderful. Thank you. So I believe you will be familiar with many of the concepts that I'm about to bring up. So to motivate today's discussion, we can think about us. we are here as humans, and I believe that people want to live their life in the most successful way that they can. We want to make our lives a success. Now, to do this, we need our best understanding of what life is and what the world is. Basically, what is all this that we're dealing with? What is this game that we're playing? So in this investigation, we're going to consider two sources of knowledge about the nature of reality. The first is science, second one is Buddhism. Science does not know everything, but it does have a basis in reality. It's based on the experiments, the observations that we can do. Now, Buddhism, on the other hand, is a tradition that has given us the answers right away without our own work. It's divine knowledge, knowledge that is just given to us. And Buddhism also has a reputation for being the most compatible with science among the different religions. So we're going to start with the Buddhist view. And both science and Buddhism claim to be valid. So they better match at some level. So here are the topics we're going to cover today. First, we're going to look at the different obstacles and two keys to confidence in Buddhism. We're going to investigate how this world becomes manifest. We're going to reconstruct the puzzle of reality based on observations. And then we're going to listen to the Buddhist view on how the world works. And then we're going to close with the importance of understanding emptiness in Buddhist teachings. And I'm going to give just a brief conclusion and present more additional information that we can discuss depending on our interests here. So I'm going to use different colored text in the slides that follow. So this is the legend. If you see yellow, that's things that I think are important. So I use yellow for emphasis. Gray is just regular text. And then I use pink for my own opinion. So you need to be careful of the pink things because they're just me. So you should think about those to see if you agree, if you think they make sense. So please feel free to stop me to ask any clarifying questions. But if you want to take the discussion into a different tangent, then please save it for the end of our discussion. All right, we're going to start with what Buddhism teaches. So Buddhism teaches a lot of things, and I categorize them into the truth. Okay, Buddhism teaches the truth, or so it claims. It also teaches compassion and guidelines for life, which are great, but they're also similar to values from other traditions, so not very special. Buddhism also teaches some hard-to-prove claims, including rebirth, spiritual powers, different planes of existence, also multiple worlds. Now, some people take this on faith, some people don't. Buddhism also tells us about miracles that have taken place, like laser coming out of Buddha's forehead, like confetti falling from the skies when the Buddha spoke, and the earth tremored when the Buddha was giving his sermons. And these things are often glossed over when different Dharma masters talk about these, or they are simply explained away as metaphors. And finally, Buddhism also teaches some things that are just contradictions to common knowledge. And to me, this was the biggest offender. It kept me away from having confidence in Buddhism for quite a few years. I think many of you will recognize this as Mount Sumeru. So, how many people have seen this picture? Okay, great. We're going to get into this picture a little later, but basically this is Buddhism's teaching on what our world looks like. There's a big mountain in the middle, and then the sun and moon circling around it with us living at the base. Okay, so this is very different from any second grader's knowledge of what the solar system or what the Milky Way galaxy looks like. So this is, but Buddha says that, he teaches the truth. So I had a hard time with this one. All right, we're going to go straight to the two keys that allowed me to start developing confidence in Buddhism. The first is reincarnation. So when I was starting to do the research, the first thing I went after was the Buddhist claim that we reincarnate, we come into different life forms, life after life. So reincarnation is a basic premise of Buddhism. The Buddha did not even try to argue that reincarnation was real. It was basically just common knowledge 2,600 years ago. And Buddhism is not the only religion that talks about reincarnation. Hinduism talks about it, and in fact, Christianity that came later also talks about reincarnation. But that part was simply deleted from the Bible. So they actually have this in their tradition, they just lost it. All right, so before I did the research, I've heard many stories that people tell about reincarnation. I believe many of you probably have heard stories about reincarnation, but for me, and probably for many of you, you probably found it difficult to believe because we don't know the circumstances. These stories were not vetted for accuracy or truthfulness. So I wondered, has anyone done a rigorous study of whether reincarnation was real or not? Has anyone bothered to look this up before? No, okay. We're very fortunate to have Google. If you just Google reincarnation study or reincarnation research, within 30 seconds you'll find the answer, and that's what I did. I found the answer to my lifelong question within about 30 seconds when I just tried.
And that very famous book, right, Many Lives, Many Masters, was talking about this too, right?
That's right, that's right. Many Lives, Many Masters, it's a story from a psychologist and his patient. So very good, but for me, it was not enough as the starting point. I needed something even firmer. And it turns out that these people have done it. This is Dr. Ian Stevenson from the University of Virginia School of Medicine. I recommend, yes, take a photo of this slide, remember this name, and look it up when you go home. He started doing reincarnation research in, I believe, the 1960s because he heard about his patients coming in and telling him about their children, usually 2 to 3 years old, talking about their previous lives. So it didn't just happen once, it happened many times. So this intrigued him. So he devoted the next 50 years of his life into studying this phenomenon. Whenever they heard about the report of a child having past life memories, he and his team went out to investigate. They first checked the accuracy of the children's account of the previous personality. They checked whether the details are true, like the name, where they lived, how they died. So they verified it with the local hospital records, police records, newspaper. And they also looked at whether the family had another avenue of getting this information, for example, from relatives, from publications in the library. And they looked at whether the family had a motivation to commit fraud. So he went about this with a very skeptical mindset, basically being detectives to try to solve these cases, to see how the child could have known about this previous person that lived. So over the 50-some years, they accumulated over 5,000 cases. And it turned out that for about half of the cases, they could find an alternative explanation for how the child could have had this information about this previously deceased person. But for the other half of the cases, about 2,500 of the cases, they could not find any explanation that the child could have had information about this previous personality. And in these 2,500 cases, basically reincarnation was the only possible explanation. Ian Stevenson is no longer with us, but his work is being carried on by Dr. Jim Tucker, also at the University of Virginia School of Medicine. So if you look up Jim Tucker now, you'll also see his talks on YouTube, which I recommend that you do. Do take a look. He does a much better job of explaining his research than I can. So this is one of the stories that they often use to illustrate the point. So this boy on the left his name is James Leininger, and as a kid, about 2 years old, he would have nightmares about being trapped in a plane that was crashing. And when he played, he played with toy planes, and he always crashed them into the family coffee table. So when the father asked him what he was doing, basically the kid recalls being a pilot who was shot down in World War II. And the little child would also sign his drawings, James 3. So his name was James, he signed James 3. And his father asked him, why did he sign James 3? He said, I'm the third James. And it turned out, when the father traced the story of the kid, he found out that his previous name was James Houston. And this James Houston was a pilot who was shot down in the Second World War. And this boy on the left remembered his previous name. He remembered the name of the airplane that he flew, the name of the aircraft carrier that he took off from. He remembered the name of his wingman and the specifics of the crash. And the father verified this in the US military records. So this is one of the stories, and just one out of thousands of stories. So my spending only a few minutes on this topic cannot convey the strength of the evidence coming out of the extensive investigation done by Dr. Ian Stevenson and Dr. Jim Tucker. So I encourage everyone to look up their research and to get a fuller picture. For me, the evidence is so overwhelming that it leaves me with zero doubt that reincarnation is a 100% real phenomenon. So having this as a base, then we can talk about like the book by Dr. Brian Weiss, Many Lives, Many Masters. Once we know that reincarnation is real, we know that our consciousness is not a result of brain function. This is not something physical. Our consciousness is not physical, and it has an existence that can be detached from our physical bodies. Now, there are other observations about the nature of consciousness or spirit that I'll share now. You can also take a photograph here. The names here, you can use them as seeds for your Google search or YouTube search. They'll yield a lot of information. Dr. Brian Weiss, which we just talked about, he got his information through hypnotic regression. So he puts his patients into hypnosis, and they are able to access different layers of their consciousness and bring up information from those layers. There are also many researchers who study near-death experiences. I won't put names here because there's just so many. And you can look up Russell Targ, who studied extrasensory perception. So in Buddhist speak, that is our spiritual powers, Shen Tong. He worked for the CIA's program using this to spy on the Russians. Okay, Rupert Sheldrake studies extended mind, how our mind is not just confined to our brains. Okay, so like how owners and pets have a connection, how pets seem to know, for example, when an owner wants to come home, when does the pet know? Stuff like this. And it turns out that the pet knows the owner wants to come home as soon as the owner has that thought, perhaps kilometers away, still at work. So very interesting research. And Roger Nelson studies collective consciousness. So everyone together, when our minds are focused on the same thing, it can have physical effect. And Li Sichen, previous president of National Taiwan University, studies spiritual realms, basically direct communication with spirits not in our physical world. So please look up these names. There's a wealth of research here. So if you look at all those research here in your spare time, I believe you'll come to a summary like this. First is reincarnation and rebirth is supported by a large body of evidence done primarily by the two researchers that we just mentioned. Second one, consciousness is not a result of brain activity. Third, consciousness does not require a physical body. Fourth, consciousness can pervade space and time. And the final point, there are conscious, intelligent beings outside our physical world. If I were to show this to myself 5 years ago, I would think I was a lunatic. This is still very wild to me, and I still find it difficult to believe because it is so different from our everyday experience. But this is what the facts say, not just based on my own personal experience, but based on rigorous research. And this is just the truth that we have to come to accept. All right, so that was the first key. That was the easy one. The second key.
Can you interrupt for the last point, the last slide?
Sorry?
Last point, the last
Okay.
slide. Can you give, this is kind of a bit junky for me that you come to this conclusion from what you talked about before. So why do you come to the summary that there are conscious, intelligent beings outside our physical world?
Okay.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, let's go back one slide. Please look up research by Li Sichen. This is what he studied. So in his research, he's able, through basically a girl who's particularly sensitive to receiving these spiritual messages, they were able to communicate with these spiritual beings not in our physical world. So that last name is the one to look up. So, sorry, please.
I have a similar question. Back to the slide earlier.
Okay.
I guess it would be very helpful if you can elaborate what do you mean by consciousness. Consciousness is not a result of brain activity, as well as it doesn't require a physical body.
Okay, all right. In mainstream science today, the paradigm is what we call scientific materialism. So many scientists believe that this physical world is all there is, and all phenomena can be explained by physical processes. Now, when we say consciousness is not the result of brain activity, that is going against the assumption of most neuroscientists. Most neuroscientists believe that this awareness, like this ability to be aware, they believe somehow comes from the chemical reactions, like the electrical signals that's happening in the physical brain. Now, if you look at if you look at the research in near-death experiences, you will see that many people have conscious experiences when their brain has stopped functioning, and when they're resuscitated, their brain comes back to life. They then tell the people around them, hey, I wasn't dead just then. That wasn't just a blink. I was having such and such an experience. I was walking down the hallway. I saw what you did. So stuff like that. Near-death experience and out-of-body experiences. So these basically confirm that consciousness is not a result of brain activity. And another one is, if we go back to reincarnation, and these children with previous past life memories, think about how that could have happened. The child is born as a baby. The baby does not have any information in its physical brain. The physical brain starts out fresh. Now, the child is somehow able to access memory, access information from a different lifetime. So this information could not have been born with the baby in the brain, because that is a new physical entity with no preloaded information. Does that?
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. So, all right, we're going to then move on to the second key, which deals with emptiness. So the explanation of this one is a little more involved than the spiritual parts. Before we dive in, let's quickly review the role of emptiness in Buddhism. So this is how I see the role of emptiness. Emptiness is the core teaching of Buddhism. All Buddha Dharma, all of Buddha's teachings flow out through understanding what emptiness is and how emptiness gives rise to phenomena. And this includes Buddha's teachings on the ultimate truths to conventional truths, from the wisdom of how to behave in this world to the wisdom of attaining enlightenment. So these teach us how emptiness gives rise to phenomena and how the different phenomena interact. So for us, we are also phenomena that has arisen out of this emptiness. And if we can understand the empty nature of dependent origination, 缘起性空, and internalize this understanding, then we will naturally let go of a dualistic view of the world. And this dualistic view of the world is what causes so much suffering, because it leads us to believe that we are separate and that we need to compete with each other. So as we start to understand this emptiness, we will also start to help each other as we understand that we are part of the same existence, and together we can return to a state of tranquility or nirvana, nibbana, that Buddha names. So let's start with a very famous quote that's central to the Diamond Sutra. All conditioned phenomena are like dreams. Illusions, bubbles, shadows, like dew and like lightning. This is how we should contemplate. So I believe that we would all know this very well. 一切有为法，如梦幻泡影，如露亦如电，应作如是观。So here, 一切有为法 is all conditioned dharma. So in Buddhism, the Buddha says there are two types of phenomena. Basically matter and consciousness, material phenomena and spiritual phenomena. Now science is a discipline that deals with the matter part a lot. So let's see how science can help us understand that part of emptiness. So we're going to do an experiment today that will illustrate the point and help us understand what emptiness is. So in my hand is this little slide here on the left. It's got little slits. Can I have a volunteer? Okay, thank you, Tina. So would you verify for everyone that this is what we're showing up on the TV?
Yes.
The same thing? Okay, thank you. So now this is a laser pointer. I believe some of you probably have done this in physics class, right? Double slit experiment?
Yeah.
Yeah, huh? Okay, super. So, so Tina is going to help us shine the laser pointed at the wall a little further. Yeah, through the middle slits. Anyone will do. Okay, it's further away. It's very easy. No, just back up.
Oh.
The whole thing. So let's take a look at what's happening on the wall.
看得到吗？
Yeah.
What are we
Okay.
supposed to see?
Okay. If it's clear, you will see what you're supposed to see. What you will see, you will see little dots that form a line, and some, they are what we call interference pattern bands. So you will see this line, but the line is not continuous. There are little dots. It's made up of a lot of dots. So like that. Okay, you're supposed to see that just in red. Okay, so confirm?
Confirm, yes.
Okay. So we've aimed the laser through two slits. Now, why did it turn into many different dots? Are we supposed to just see two dots? Why do we see so many?
Why is a waveform?
Yes, excellent. Tina's jumping ahead, but yeah, applaud. That's right, applauding is good. Because light is a wave. So like this, like ripples in the pond. When the laser goes through the two slits, they propagate as waves, and these waves then interfere with each other. So we'll see some parts that where they interfere constructively, so the peaks and troughs become more extreme. And there are also parts where they cancel out, so these become the dark spots that we saw on the wall. So we have light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light. So many different points that we see. All right. So if we map out that interference, if we place a piece of paper along that plane, this is what we would see. So this is the light and dark bands. Now if we place a sensitive camera on the other side, we will see individual photons hitting the screen in some places where they're more concentrated and some places where they're not so concentrated. So something very weird just happened. In the previous slide, we said light was a wave, but now we see that they turn into little dots. So are they waves or are they little particles? Scientists could not figure this out for a long time, and many are still confused by why this is so. So sometimes scientists try to lower the intensity of the laser. So with a very weak laser, they saw individual photons impacting their detector, kind of like this. So they thought that if only one photon goes through those slits each time, then there is no other photon that can interfere with it. So they would expect to see only two lines, two dots through the double slit. Yes? So is this okay so far? Okay, so single photons. So they kept running. They accumulated more photons. And it turned out that it still built up to an interference pattern. So what is each photon interfering with? The only possibility is that each photon is a wave. It passes through both slits at the same time and interferes with itself. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Everyone okay? Okay. So besides using photons, scientists also tried this with other particles. They tried it with electrons, protons, and bigger atoms. They also tried even molecules, which are the building blocks of our physical world. And it turns out that all these particles that they tried also formed an interference pattern like that. So it's not just light, but physical material, the stuff that this table is made out of. If you throw it through two slits, it will produce an interference pattern on the other side. So here comes a very important question. So we're going to stop here and think about it. If matter truly exists, can it simultaneously pass through both slits? If the stuff that this table is made out of truly exists, can it simultaneously pass through two slits? Anyone want to answer? I see Michael shaking his head. And I agree with him.
This question actually doesn't, it's not valid because it's statistics. It's quantum physics statistics, so there's no simultaneous. It's a chance. It's statistics.
Exactly. But definitely the result is statistical. Now, in order to produce those statistics, the particle needed to pass through both slits. We know that. But if the particle truly exists, then can it pass through two slits at the same time?
You cannot observe, so you cannot tell.
Very excellent. So basically the big secret from asking this question is matter does not truly exist. What matter is really just information that has no physical existence. If it had physical existence, it would not be able to pass through two slits at the same time. I see, yeah. I like your reaction. So, the appearance of particles in specific locations is just a fleeting illusion, like this brother said. The result is statistical. Now, what's truly happening is a particle manifests at a point when it hits the screen, and then it continues to evolve as a spread out wave. So the light wave that we saw earlier propagating like ripples, it continues to evolve like that. And those waves are simply mathematical information without physical existence. I know this is a lot to swallow. Let's explain some more. Just earlier this year, some scientists have tried doing this type of experiment, superposition, with larger and larger particles. So earlier this year, they used a grain of sand that is, I think, 16 micrograms. So big enough for our eyes to see. And they vibrated this grain of sand using two different frequencies. So they excited the grain of sand at two different frequencies. Now, if the grain of sand is a physical thing, it would not be able to vibrate at two different frequencies. So when the scientists measured the behavior of this grain of sand, they found that it was in a superposition of two different frequencies, meaning the sand was actually vibrating at two different frequencies when they measured. So the statistics from from the measurement say that the grain of sand was vibrating at 2 different frequencies. But no physical thing that we understand conventionally would be able to do that. So this basically is just confirming that the lack of reality for the tiny elementary particles also carries on to the stuff that they build. The bigger things are also non-existent. So when the grains of sand is measured, it assumes some position, some definite position. But then they instantaneously return to being a mathematical wave and interacts with surrounding waves until they are observed again. So this is how the scientists model it. Since the 1920s, or about 100 years ago, physicists have known about how to represent this indefinite fuzzy state of particles. They call this the quantum wave function. And it relates to the probability of finding a particle in a particular position or having some other characteristic when it is observed. So scientists, physicists can also calculate what happens when particles interact. So when two fuzzy particles interact, the scientists can calculate the resulting probability by combining their wave functions. So when we take 2 blurry things and put them together, what we get something, we get a bigger blur. So this then leads us to the central mystery in quantum physics. It is called the measurement problem. So this is something that has been hanging around since the beginning of quantum physics, and there is still no consensus on the answer even today. So this measurement problem can be stated in different ways. One is what constitutes a measurement that causes the wave function to collapse. Collapsing a wave function means it goes from fuzzy to definite. Or how does the world go from a big blur to the definite state that we experience? Right now, we don't think anything is fuzzy. Things have definite locations. In other words, this measurement problem is asking about how our world becomes manifest, how it goes from these mathematical representations to something that we touch, feel, and see. So how do we solve the measurement problem? There are actually many, many different proposals, but no consensus at this point. Now, many of these proposals are limited in the data that they consider. They do not consider, for example, the reincarnation, the spiritual phenomena that we just talked about. And they also fail to take into account some of the experiments. So we don't have time to go into all the different proposed answers and why they are problematic. We're just going to go to the explanation that I believe makes sense. But if you're interested in these rejected theories, you can come see me afterwards and we can talk about them. So I'm not the first person to propose this answer, but I believe that we can help to back it up with evidence and logic. Now, before we dive in, we're going to first do an experiment together. This result will help us in just a few minutes. Now, everyone, lend me your finger. Now, use your mind to move your finger.
Use my mind.
Yes, use your mind.
Not
Move
my
your
muscle.
finger. All right, whatever you do, just move your finger. Okay. Okay, so we're all doing it. Now, let's think about what just happened. This is to our best understanding what just happened. We are looking at the cell membrane of a neuron. So this is inside the neuron, and that is outside the neuron. Now there are ions floating around. These are sodium sodium ions and potassium ions. Now, in the main brain, there are what's called these ion pumps that can move ions from inside to outside, outside to inside. And these pumps are powered by ATPs. Probably a lot of you who study biology would know these ATPs have phosphate molecules attached to them. So when one of the phosphate molecules detaches from this ATP, it gives power to this ion pump. So the ion pump will move and move the, for example, it moves the sodium ion outside of the neuron. And this creates a voltage difference between the outside and inside. And this is what starts the electrical signal that travels down our nervous system to our muscles that we use to move our finger. So, what triggered this? What triggered this to happen? It was our intention. Our intention to move our finger caused a chemical reaction to happen here. Okay, so this is an example of our mind or our consciousness causing something physical some physical change to take place. Let's keep this in mind. Okay, now back to the measurement problem. In 1932, a scientist, John von Neumann, the person who invented the computer, he analyzed the measurement problem in this way. So he was looking at how when a physicist performs an experiment and measures the result, the chain of connection often looks like this. So we have the particle that is being measured and the detector that measures the particle. And then the detector is attached to some electronics like amplifiers and signal processors. And that connects to some display, for example, our computer display. And that display gives off photons that then travel to our eyes. And from our eyes, it goes up our optical nerve into our neurons. And we believe our neurons have something to do with consciousness. So this is the chain of how we perceive something that happens in the physical world. Now, in which part of the chain would these fuzzy probabilities become a definite result? So all of this is made up of particles, quantum particles that are not definite, that are all fuzzy. But this whole big chain of fuzz becomes definite because it's evident that we see the world is not fuzzy. Everything is definite. So we're going to also take a hint from earlier, from the children remembering past lives. These memories cannot come from the children's new physical bodies. This implies that consciousness is different from everything that came before. So everything to the left side of consciousness is made up of matter, of particles. And only consciousness is of a completely different nature. So observations thus far suggest that consciousness, whatever it is, has a two-way relationship to wave function collapse. If we recall the experiment where we wiggled our finger, our consciousness caused the fuzzy particles inside our brain, the ATPs, to release one of the phosphate atoms to power the sodium pump. That reaction somehow was influenced by our intention to move our muscle. So, in other words, our consciousness can influence the happenings in the physical world, and the world becomes manifest because of consciousness. Now, let's say this again. All of this stuff in front are physical particles that obey quantum laws, which means they're probabilistic, they're fuzzy. But when they touch on consciousness, consciousness collapses all of this fuzziness into stuff that's definite. Okay. So there's a very deep conclusion that comes out of this. This picture implies that the world that we experience, including the sensations, not just our sight, but sound and touch, all of this is just an appearance that comes into being for our consciousness to perceive. Because without consciousness, everything would be fuzzy. Consciousness is the trigger that caused all of this fuzziness to become definite. All right. Now let's reinforce our understanding of this non-realness of the world from another observation, quantum entanglement. So quantum entanglement is the phenomenon where when two particles interact and then we send them very far apart, and then we measure one of them. And when we measure one of them, we also simultaneously log or determine the state of the other with zero delay. Basically, even if these particles are at different ends of the universe, when we measure one of them, the other is, the state of the other is determined simultaneously with no delay. So what does this mean when two things very far apart can change together? This basically implies that space is not real in the conventional sense. This is saying more than just how particles behave, but at a deeper level, its entanglement is saying something about the nature of space. If space is fundamental, if space is a real thing, then it would take some time for any signal to travel. According to Einstein, that is the speed of light or the speed of causality. But quantum entanglement, with quantum entanglement, for two things that are very far apart to change simultaneously implies that the space is not really, truly real. We're going to explain about this more a little later. But this is not something that most physicists think about. Some do think about this and agree with what I just said. But let's move on. So if we go back to the double slit experiment, we're going to look at something that's called the observer effect. So the double slit experiment confused many physicists, so they tried all different ways to understand what's really going on. So in the top picture, we have the particle gun, and it's shooting out particles, like, say, electrons. And these electrons come out as waves of probability. Now, some of this will travel through the two slits, where then they become new ripples, two ripples that interfere with each other, which gives us the interference pattern we see here, or we saw earlier on the wall. So scientists then wonder, hey, through which one of the two slits did this electron go through? So they put an observer, a detector here to see if it came out of the top slit or bottom slit. Now, it turns out that as soon as they did this, they lost the interference pattern. And they collapsed to no interference pattern. They saw only two bands on the wall. And so scientists have tried all sorts of different ways to determine through which slit that this particle went through. And it turns out that as long as the scientists are able to determine which path the particle goes through, they lost the interference pattern. So why is this? I think by now we can probably have a good guess at why this happens. It is because of consciousness. And let's see another experiment that confirms our guess. This researcher's name is Dean Radin. Good to take a note of his name as well. So the experiment that he did was he had a laser going through a double slit, just like what we saw, and he encased this in a black box with a detector screen on the other side. Now, he also asked a meditator who is in a different room to simply imagine. So this meditator is imagining that he is sitting at the double slit, observing photons from the laser going through. And turns out that simply by imagining this, he changed the pattern on the camera. It's not a big change, but it is a measurable change. I think it's at about 5 sigma. So the effect is strong enough to be considered a new discovery. So in his words, the result of the present experiment appears to be consistent with a consciousness-related interpretation of the quantum measurement problem. And he says, actually I say, quantum possibilities open the door for anomalies. So when we talk about the different miracles, this phenomena opens the door for them. Because if a meditator can have a small effect, then a very advanced being like the Buddha, by extrapolation, can have a bigger effect. So there are some information that we don't have time to go into today, at least in the first part of our talk. But if you are interested, you can make a note and we can discuss this afterwards. So there are some experiments, they're called quantum eraser experiments, that imply that there's an intelligent underlying mechanism outside of our 3+1 space-time. And quantum vacuum fluctuations and the Casimir effect match the Buddha's description of the fluctuations in the alaya consciousness, or our eight consciousness, or storehouse consciousness, in other words. Now there's also a physicist who has developed a theory which he calls the 44 derangements that explain the constants of nature. This theory is very new. It is not yet popular among the physics community, but it does explain the mystery of where the constants of nature come from. And this basically matches the Buddha's description of how phenomena arises out of emptiness. If you're interested, we can go into more detail at the end. So, and at the end of the presentation, if we have time, we can also talk about how consciousness happens in snapshots. This is basically a corollary of how of our understanding of quantum physics and consciousness. And we can talk about how consciousness manifests the world and how everyone here we co-influence this shared world. So that was a lot, but I think we have enough puzzle pieces to try to reconstruct the reality based on this data. So our observations so far paint a picture. So to summarize, space and matter are manifestations of a deeper reality, and all physical things exist and interact as entangled superpositions of states, and which is simply just information. And these are states or information that is present in a deeper reality. Form is then rendered, so this form, everything that we see, is then rendered in other words, measured, or their wave function is collapsed in snapshots and fed into our consciousness. So putting this all together, we get a picture that our world is virtual. The world that we experience is kind of like when we play a VR game. We put like the VR headset over our heads, and all of our sensory input comes from that. It's being fed into our perception. Our real world is a lot like that as well. It's virtual, and while it is so detailed that it feels real in everyday experience, like this table feels so hard to me, but it actually does not have physical existence. All the particles in this table will pass through the two slits at the same time, meaning that they don't have true physical existence. It only feels solid to me because of some sort of computation that is going on, saying that the particles in my hand will repel the particles of this table. And that is all mathematical information. There is nothing physical here. So while it is very detailed, very high level of detail, the true reality is not this, but the underlying mechanism that allows this to happen. It's the simulator that's running our virtual world. So these observations paint a picture. Consciousness, in turn, can affect events in this virtual world, just like when we wiggled our finger, we cause the chemical reaction in our neuron to happen in a particular way. And for additional information, that if you want to discuss, we can do it at the end. The underlying mechanism that runs this virtual world is extremely intelligent. This is something we can see in experiments. And it seems to know our potential for deducing knowledge in the future. And I'm talking about the delayed choice quantum eraser. So from that experiment, we know that nature, this underlying mechanism, at least knows about the path of elementary particles. And it must have vast computational power to be able to run our entire universe. From our observations, we also know that consciousness transcends space and time. And there are realms beyond our ordinary experience. And linking to them through consciousness is possible. So this is from our data. This is what the world looks like. There's some underlying mechanism which gives rise to all the phenomena here. Part of the phenomena is the physical universe, and part of that phenomena is individual consciousness that, I seem to have a mind, so I'll say this is my mind. Now, there are many individual consciousnesses, like the people here, all the living beings on the planet and other planets, and these consciousnesses seem to be able to talk to each other at a deeper level. And that's not so surprising because they all arise from this underlying mechanism. They are connected at this level. Now we also know that this individual consciousness can affect the physical universe, just like when we wiggled our finger, our consciousness changed something in the physical world. We also know that there are other realms in addition to the universe, the 3+1 space-time that we live in, and that the information in this physical universe is rendered or measured and then fed into our individual consciousness. And our individual consciousness puts together all of this information and creates the illusion that we are living in 3+1 space-time. So this physical universe has its own laws of evolution. This is what science studies very well. But science believes that this is all there is. Now there is actually, reality is much richer than what scientists are willing to admit. So we're going to take a look at an example of the power of this underlying mechanism. Quantum computing is something that humans have developed recently. I think probably all of us know something about quantum computing. So in quantum computing, what we're doing is we're isolating some particles from the environment, and then we manipulate their superposition of states. And then we finally measure the resulting states, and that's the result of the computation. So we know that quantum computing is very powerful because it's basically computing all different solutions simultaneously in parallel. Now, what's actually doing this computation? It is the underlying mechanism of reality. This computation is not done by a mechanism that us humans have designed. We are simply accessing the computational power of nature, the computational power of the underlying mechanism of reality. That's how, of course, the quantum computers are only operating on a few particles, but this underlying mechanism of reality is operating, is computing the entire universe.
This part is not entirely true. This part is not entirely true.
Oh, would you like to?
Yes, quantum computing, the advantage of quantum computing, because it's not two-digit, because for example, 6 states, so you have 6 states instead of 1, 0, and 1. So that's why it's so powerful to decrypt anything, to doing computation on certain things. But that's it. That's the only the purpose, because we got more than 2 states. That's the only purpose. Yeah.
Right. Quantum computers they basically compute all possible states in parallel.
Depending on implementation, for example, you might have a 6 state or 8 state, but 8 state just 2 to the 8, so it's like for example, 1,000 times more faster than the 0 and 1. So it's different thing. They can compute something, but they cannot compute other things. So they have, at least for now, they have some limitation. I'm not saying in the future, I'm saying today.
Right. It certainly has the number of the qubits we can put together at the same time.
It's been on state. The 4th state, you can add 2 to 4, 16 more powerful with today.
Right. Yeah, yes. Thank you for chiming in. Okay, so now we've seen what we've put together a picture of the world based on observations that we could make. Now let's take a look at what Buddhism says about the nature of reality. But before we do that, we first need to overcome some obstacles about confidence in Buddhism. We need to construct Buddhism's credibility. So first, let's recall that reincarnation is a real phenomenon. And it being real means that it is plausible that the Buddha was not just some random person making up a fantasy, but an advanced being coming into this world to teach us. And the Buddhist teachings on the nature of reality matches the observations of modern science, particularly quantum physics. And experiments show that mind can affect matter. We just wiggled our finger, and a meditating mind has a greater effect. This is what we saw from Dean Radin's meditator double-slit experiment. And then there's Mao Tzu, which we promised we would come back to. So in the Buddhist view, we live here, and there is a big mountain in the center of our world, and there's the sun and the moon revolving around it. Now we can see that this does not match the solar system or the Milky Way galaxy that we know. So was the Buddha stupid? He could not have been stupid, because when he was alive, he would have seen sunrise and sunset that looks like this. The sun came out of the horizon, went across the sky, and went down the other horizon. the Buddha would not have seen a sun circling around a big mountain. So, for the Buddha to say that the world looks like that is definitely not based on the experience of people like us. Now, the Buddha also said elsewhere in the Kalachakra that there are 9 planets orbiting the sun. And he also gave a way of computing when solar eclipses, lunar eclipses would happen. And this is what the Tibetans have been using for centuries to predict the time of solar and lunar eclipses, which is important in their tradition of cultivation. So we can have confidence that the Buddha was very clear about the geometry between the sun, the earth, and the moon. And it is definitely, it definitely does not look like, Mount Sumeri does not look like this. So, what this picture depicts is not a picture of the world as we see it, but how the world is represented to spiritual beings at a different level of cultivation. If you think back to our world being virtual, it's easier to accept that, with the informational world, this information can be represented differently to beings of different capabilities. Furthermore, Tibetan monks also report that when they go into a deep state of samadhi, they see the world like this. Now, of course, these are personal reports, so you can take it with a grain of salt. Just relaying the information that this is their actual experience in samadhi. Now, to reinforce a little more that the Buddha knew what he was talking about, this is, I'm going to recite a little bit from Hwang. So in Hwang, the Buddha says that, let me backtrack a little. So the Mount Sumeru description you've probably heard it most closely corresponds to a galaxy. Now the Buddha in Hwang, the Avatamsaka Sutra, says that there are different shapes of galaxies. Some are rotational, some river-like, some vortex-like, some wheel-like, forest-like, fetus-like, cloud-like, net-like. So the Buddha says there are many different shapes of galaxies, and he did not mention a shape like Mount Sumeru. So these are photos from NASA. And the Buddha also says each galaxy is surrounded by a vast number of other galaxies. So we can have confidence that the Buddha knew what the universe and the galaxy appeared to us mundane beings. So these points of consideration should give us some confidence that the Buddha knew what he was talking about and he wasn't just fantasizing. Okay, so now let's move on to what the Buddha says about spiritual phenomena. So he talks about rebirth, he talks about multiple planes of existence, he also talks about cultivation and spiritual powers. The Buddha also explains how our world comes into being from the emptiness of nothing. So in the Surangama Sutra, Leng Yan Jing, he says that the origin of all phenomena is the mind. All causes and effects, worlds and their particles, take form because of the mind. They appear, then disappear in place. And then in the Avatamsaka Sutra, he says all phenomena manifest because of the mind and are formed by consciousness. So these correspond very well with the observations we have from science, particularly from quantum physics. The Buddhism also talks about deep reality. So it talks about dependent origination of all phenomena arising from a background of emptiness. In the Diamond Sutra, Jingang Jing, we mentioned earlier that all phenomena are illusory, like evaporating dew and flashes of lightning. The Heart Sutra, Xin Jing, says the 5 aggregates of the self, Wu, form, sensation, perception, volition, and consciousness, do not have true existence. Because we live in a virtual world, and our bodies are also virtual. So they do not have true existence. So Buddhism calls the underlying mechanism that we've been talking about, Buddhism calls it the alaya, alaye shi, or di ba shi. And when this alaya consciousness is cleared of its defilements, I like to think of it clearing the data in the computer, then we're left with the computer itself. Buddhism calls that clean state, the pure state, the amala consciousness, or the ninth consciousness. It also has the name, the Tathagata Garbha, or Ru Lai Zang Shi. So that's the picture from Buddhism looks like this. So this is very similar to what we saw a little earlier from the observations we have from science. So just like the scientific picture, there's an underlying mechanism in the Buddhist view that's called the alaya, or the eighth consciousness. Now, if we remove the karma or the information from the eighth consciousness, then we are left with the clean, the pure version called the amala, amolo shi. This is what we also know as the ninth consciousness, or emptiness. In different religions, it has different names. In Taoism, it's called the Tao. In Islam, they call it Allah. It's also God in Christianity. Hindus call it Brahman. Scientists describe it as theory of everything. And the Buddha says this is our true self. And out of this true self, phenomena arises. Part of it is the physical world, and part of it is the consciousness. So this eighth consciousness has operations. This consciousness self-reflects, self-grasps, or becomes self-aware, and that is what we call the seventh consciousness. Now, these individual streams of consciousness that become self-aware are what we call Di Liu Shi, the sixth consciousness. And this sixth consciousness receives information from the outside world. So the physical universe has a lot of information, and this information, when it comes into contact with our consciousness, the wave functions collapse, all the fuzziness and the blurriness goes away and becomes definite. And this data is fed into our sixth consciousness, where we form our impression of the world. This is how we feel like we are living in 3+1 space-time. So our actions here basically are mental actions that influence the physical universe. So there is a two-way interaction between mind and body. So this is the Buddhist view, and we can see that with the scientific view, they match very well.
I wonder, do you actually mean that the physical universe exists? Do you mean that?
Okay, I mean the physical universe, it exists, but not in the conventional sense. It exists more like the universe in the video game. So it's not that our world does not exist. We know it exists. We just look around us. There is something here. What I'm saying is, what's here is not physical. What is here is information. This is information that is usually in a probabilistic state. And when when they come into contact with the individual consciousness, the probabilities collapse into something definite. It does not. It goes from fuzzy to definite on contact with consciousness somehow. I don't know how it happens, but from observation, this is what's happening.
它也可以这样理解嘛，哈，比如说我们都是在打电动，我们有不同的 level， 就是有不同的关要过。那我们大家，我们在这个娑婆世界的众生，比如说都是在这一关的，所以我们在玩这个游戏的时候，我们看到的东西都是一样的。然后我们看到的世界，就是我们在打电动的时候，你要走到那个地方的时候，这个东西才会被画出来。然后我们越走进去的时候，就越画越多。可是像比较 enlightened 的，他们可能已经到不同的 level 了，所以他们到下一个关，所以他看到的东西就跟我们是不一样的，是这样的意思吗？
是的，是的, exactly. So what Tina is saying that we are living in a game world. That's how I see it as well. And this game world is just made up of information. It's a vast amount of information. Like just the number of atoms in this table is probably something like 10 to the 27, 10 to the 26, or 10 to the 27 atoms. So there's a vast amount of information. But of course, this is, with our current technology, we think this is way too complex for anything we could build. But somehow, this is what nature is doing. It is constructing this vast world and rendering it for us, for our consciousness, so that our consciousness puts together all of the five senses into an experience of 3+1 space-time.
所以，再回到你的这个符号，那比如说我们学佛啊，我们说我们想要 enlighten， 或者我们要 attain 我们的 Buddhahood， 那是不是 attaining Buddhahood 就是要arise to 这个 Amala 的这个 state， 就 break 的，到了那个 state 是就 break 的 reincarnation 了，你就 be the same as the one。
Yeah, I think that's kind of how I see it as well. Because we are, through our many past lives, we have been in this game for a long time, and each time we come into the game, we bring all our history with us, or we bring our karma with us, and this karma has a pull. It influences the situations that happen to us in the game. Now, if we do a good job dealing with those information, then we start clearing up our karma, and we become less and less bound, or become less and less influenced by the phenomenon that happen in the game. So we attain more and more freedom. Kind of how I see it. Tina's view is probably better.
No. 我还是就觉得很confused。那我们若真正到了那个第九世的境界哈，是一个什么样的？
我不知道。根据佛教说，只有佛陀知道那个境界。
是说就不用再轮回的意思了吗？
就不用再回来了。
对，我们现在在轮回，是因为我们身不由己，我们的业力there's so much karma and the habitual tendencies that just keep drawing us back into reincarnation. And there's also a feedback system at work here. So if, for example, we're humans now, if we do good, then say the next life we will have good circumstances. For example, I'll be born into a very good family. But if I get born into a very good family, I'm more likely to do bad things. We see that in a lot of people. So when I start doing bad things, then I drop down. Okay, so 好不容易往上爬一点，但是因为自己的习气又会往下掉。那掉，譬如说我掉到地狱，然后在那边受苦受了很久以后，我又可以出来度假，到比较高层一点，又到轮回，我到人道来度假，很好。就佛教来说，我们大部分时间都是在比较下面的，在恶道，到三善道。 的众生是非常少数的，所以我们现在能在这边当人是非常难得的。那么如果这一次没有做好，度完假又回去，又回去辛苦了。
So I had a similar question with Tina. So given the conclusions, what individuals can act on your conclusion?
Okay.
Can you repeat the question?
Thank you. So Philip's question was, given what we know, how should we behave? Is that a good way to put it?
What can you act on the conclusion? You know, that I guess it's a more practical. Okay, what can I do with the information?
Okay, we're going to get to that in just a bit. Definitely get to it. Okay. So we talked about this a little bit. So in the Buddhist view, we live in the informational world. And just like how a computer can run many worlds, many simulations at the same time, so is reality. There are many different Buddha realms, different worlds within this, that's happening within this Amala or Laya consciousness. In playing the game of Monopoly well, I'm more interested in not playing anymore. I don't want to play Monopoly anymore. I want to have freedom from that. So the way to do that is to let go of our delusion, discrimination, and attachment. So when we let go of our attachment, then we advance from mundane beings to arhats. And then when arhats let go of their discrimination, then they become bodhisattvas. When bodhisattvas let go of their delusion that they are separate from everything, then they become Buddhas. So what we've been talking about is emptiness. How all of this, how all the different worlds in the six realms come to be from emptiness, from a state of nothingness. So we can contemplate that the appearance of form comes from rendered snapshots of interacting matter data, elementary particles in other words. But elementary particles are misleading because it makes us think that there's something physically real there. I prefer to call it just data, it's just information. So matter and space are not truly real. They are illusions created by coordinated signals coming into our minds. So if we contemplate this, then it's easier to let go of attachment to the physical world. For me, personally, it's been very helpful knowing that everything I see, including my body, it's not truly real. I'm just constructing that picture based on information that is being fed into my consciousness. And this is also the first lesson in Buddhism. The Buddha says to become a student of Buddhism, the first step is to realize or to accept that the body is not you. We are not our bodies. It's lesson number 1 in Buddhism according to the Buddha. So once we can contemplate that this form is not real, but just rendered information, then it's easier to let go of attachment to the physical world and continue on to contemplate the emptiness of the other 4 skandhas: sensation, perception, volition, and consciousness. So just like form, these are empty as well, meaning they have no intrinsic existence. They are all phenomena arising out of the 9th consciousness, arising out of the 8th consciousness. So the Diamond Sutra says, understanding this is very important. 凡所有相，皆是虚妄。若见诸相非相，即见如来。So everything that has an appearance is illusory. If you see that appearances are not what they appear to be, then you see the Tathagata. The Heart Sutra, we're very familiar with, says, it opens with, 观自在菩萨行深般若波罗蜜多时，照见五蕴皆空，度一切苦厄. So in English, the Bodhisattva of compassion, practicing the wisdom of emptiness, saw the emptiness of the five skandhas, 色受想行识, and transcended all suffering. So how is a Bodhisattva able to transcend suffering? Because he knows that none of this is real. So if I, for example, if my body gets hurt, if I think my body is real, and I will be attached to my body, and this injury to me would be very serious. It's like, oh, I am getting hurt. My body is broken. I would feel panicked. But if I have the understanding, according to Buddhism, the correct understanding that this body is not real, this body is not me, it is simply information. It's information that is being fed into my consciousness. Then it's much easier for me to let go of attachment to this and say, hey, it's not me anyway. So by having this understanding, for me personally, it has made me braver. I have a lot less fear than before. So to me, it's been quite helpful. Of course, I'm not at the level of stuff, far from it, but I'm working towards it, and to me, it's been tremendously helpful.
比较不怕死，比较不怕死。
对，比较不怕死。Basically, 我现在是完全不怕死。那还会有点怕痛。But when we experience pain, we can also understand it as just information that is being fed into our consciousness. There's nothing physical about it. It's simply data that is being piped into to our mind, to our consciousness. If we have that understanding, it's easier to brush it off. I'm not saying it's easy. When I have like headaches or like 腰痛, it's still not comfortable, but I suffer less because I know it is not me that's getting hurt. Okay. Later, if you wish to discuss more about this, we can. Buddhism also talks about the smallest amount of matter. It talks about analyzing elementary particles. It talks about the speed at which consciousness happens. It also talks about the speed of manifestation of matter, so collapse of the wave function, in other words. We can also talk more about the Diamond Sutra and Heart Sutra, how they relate to what we discussed. Reconciling mouse matter we've done already, so it's good. So now we come to the summary. So from what we've discussed, we know a naive impression of the world formed only from everyday experience, as intuitive and as real as it seems, is a misleading partial picture. We know for certain that the naive conception of the world is definitely wrong. Now, quantum experiments and Buddhism agree that the world we perceive does not have true physical existence. So in addition to the double slit experiment that we saw, the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics also, using a different approach, confirmed that local realism cannot be true. In other words, the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded for proving that the world is not real. Now, Buddhism recognizes and explains spiritual phenomena observed at the edges of science, like parapsychology in particular. And it describes deeper layers of reality that science has not investigated, like parallel worlds. Moving on with our summary, the material phenomena of our world comes from evolving matter data, basically quantum wave functions. And these quantum wave functions of all the different particles are stitched together by quantum entanglement when they interact with each other. And these entanglements from elementary particles, they form atoms. From atoms, they form cells. Cells form our bodies. These atoms also form everything in our environment and our creations, like the computers, the cell phones, the cars, the buildings, to the whole entire Earth and to our galaxy and other galaxies. Now, our consciousness connects to the matter data in this world, from the computer to different galaxies. We connect to this matter data in our neurons, but our consciousness is not necessarily bound by this connection. And all of the above phenomena, all the galaxies and universes are generated by a powerful underlying mechanism, which Buddhism says is our true self. And our goal is to return to this true self so that we are no longer living in the world of phenomena, and especially phenomena that we cannot control. So when we come to the conclusion that Philip Schiebel was asking about, so the conclusion and my suggestion to everyone is what emptiness means and how it works is at the core of Buddha's teachings. And this illusory material and spiritual world is where the phenomena of us, of all of us, happen. So we're just phenomena happening in this. We happen here and we suffer here. And we continue on and on through many lives, through a lot of reincarnation, because we keep doing things that do not align with what reality truly is. But there are paths to seizing this. So now we're going to the Four Noble Truths. There are paths to seizing this, starting with having the right understanding of reality and developing attitudes that align with the deeper truth of our existence. Equanimity from knowing the empty nature of material and mental phenomena. So we're not attached. We can stay much calmer when things happen. There's also compassion from understanding the fundamental oneness of everyone and everything. Our true selves is the underlying mechanism, not the game rules, not the characters that happen on top of it. And ultimately, our goal is the enlightenment to a boundless non-self. Buddhism talks about non-self because the conception of the self is an illusion. It's consciousness that happens in the eighth consciousness, the alaya consciousness. It processes information, and that information, those threads, if you will, become self-aware and develop a sense of self. And this sense of self and separation from others is what's leading us to suffering and to doing things that are detrimental to others and detrimental to our own futures. Okay, so I invite you to bring up your phones, scan this QR code. This will lead you to the slides that I just showed you, as well as many more underneath that I have not touched upon. So you can look through those slides and let me know if you want to talk about anything in particular. So I mentioned there's additional information that we don't really have time to go into in the main part of the presentation. But if you're interested, we can discuss those concepts